Yeah, so welcome everyone. This is our second in our series of how to develop against our platform and learn specifically here. This one obviously is focusing on LTI. There's been some changes over the past few years and even relatively recently to the specification. We've gotten LTI 1.3, which is a big change from LTI 1.1 for security reasons. There are a lot of just ideological changes, and we've noticed some of our developers struggling with that. So we decided to give this view that we have on how to do this in a basic format, how to get through registration, and so on and so forth. This is part of a series. This will be relatively basic. There are some more specific issues that we will likely have as future presentations, not just on LTI, but on some of our other integration components like REST and Ultra Extension Framework and things like that. But for today we're going to focus on a lower level LTI presentation. Please provide us with feedback. Feel free to put questions in the chat. We will answer them as we are able. We may end up holding questions until the end because we are on a relatively tight time schedule. So we're going to go ahead and get started. And Mark, take it away.
Thank you, Dylan. So, like Dylan said, we're going to talk about LTI 1.3, the core LTI 1.3 specification. We're not going to dig into the rest of Advantage today. We're getting into introductions. This is our agenda. Also, like Dylan said, we thought we had an hour and a half, but we have an hour, so I'm going to kind of fly through these. We do have a link wall with the resources on it, so you can take a screenshot with your phone and use those links to get to the resources that we talk about. We're going to do an LTI overview. We're going to talk about when you build a tool. We're going to talk about some best practices for architecture, and then during registration time, registration being when you register on your tool on our developer portal, and then deployment is when the tool is deployed to a specific Learn instance, and then we'll talk about some troubleshooting. Then we have a demo application that demonstrates the LTI 1.3 core launch. So that's me. I'm not going to dwell too much time here. I've got my neuralizer here so that you can forget about all that other integration technology that was something that started with the letter B. We're talking about LTI 1.3 today, and we'll get rid of that B technology, that B2 or something like that. I want to give credit to Davey, who's here today. He put a lot into the graphic design of these slides. Those are all his cat and dog photos, and then the black sides were done by Eric Preston, who he's moved on, but he did put a lot into the LTI 1.3. He's actually on the LTI 1.3 specification working committee with IMS, so now One EdTech. So I just want to give Eric credit here too. So where do I start? Well, let's say I have let's do some little context first. Let's say I had a building block that used the previously available launch external JSP page, and this is an actual use case that Chris Bray from the University of Arkansas Fayetteville ran into. He had a tool that would let him use a launch external JSP page, and it would launch to an external website with like the user's name and maybe some other information that he pulled up from template variables. And launch external JSP is no longer available, and building blocks are going away. So how could I replace that? Well, you would want to give the Learn admin a secure way to do this without the use of that JSP page, and it's a perfect job for Superman, the new LTI 1.3 specification. Specification and our custom parameters that we have available. So if I were doing that, where would I start? Would I ask for help? Well, a good place to start, a great place to start is developers@anthology.com. And you might be posting on the community site, community@anthology.com, or you might be getting directed to that email address. There's a bunch of us that monitor that email address and try to help out as we can. Now, eventually, it might, if you've got an LTI tool and you need to report a bug or ask for an enhancement, you're going to want to use Behind the Blackboard as a partner to request a ticket that gets officially tracked then. But a great place to start is developers@anthology.com. And what will you get? Well, you'll get some resources. And one resource is we would direct you to is docs.anthology.com. There you'll have you'll get a lot of how-to and LTI tutorials where there's link to the GitHub videos and so on. Then also on developer.anthology.com, that's where you register. That's the central registration spot for your LTI tool. When you register your tool there, after you've set up an account, you'll get a client ID that you can then have the Learn admins deploy to their Learn instances, and that client ID can be used for all Learn instances. You don't need to rely on it. In fact, we highly recommend you don't rely on the client ID to differentiate between Learn instances. You get a deployment ID when you do the deployment. So I'm going to probably repeat that several times during this presentation as it's been misunderstood by a few folks. So we want to clear that up during this presentation. And then you can also, the nice thing about the developer portal too is you, before the dev portal and before this feature came out, the Learn admin had to set up the managed placements in Learn, go through and configure those. And now as a tool vendor or tool provider, you can actually pre-configure the managed placements on the Learn system so that when your tool gets deployed to Learn, the managed placements just show up with the names and icons that you would like. And then also on that developer portal is our REST API documentation, which was the topic of the last webinar that we did. Another great place for resources is community.anthology.com, and the clients and partners and developers can communicate with each other there and with Anthology personnel. And that last bullet point, developer blog, we've got a lot of stuff about LTI 1.3 on the developer blog. And then last is, but not least, is help.anthology.com, and that's where you can find out about releases and what's in the release. There's a how-to on all products, like how to set up LTI and configure it. So that's all on help.anthology.com. Here's the link wall. I'm going to pause there just so you have a moment to take a screenshot, and those are the URLs that it could be helpful for getting started with LTI 1.3. And now I think I have something about a demo resources. I'm going to be brief on this demo. I just want to demo one thing because we have a lot to cover in an hour. So if I'm going to demo the docs.anthology.com because this is really important. I've had a lot of questions about LTI and often will send you a link to the developer documentation. What Davey and the team did who set this site up is they did a great job with the search functionality. So if I type LTI here, I get all of the major articles on LTI, like the GitHub link for the Node JavaScript that does it, or whether I wanted to use LTI or REST. Here's a main article, a big article on LTI registration and deployment with Learn. We're going to talk about that some today, but the article is here. So you can just go to the docs.anthology.com and type in the search, and you'll find what you need. So rather than trying to poke around through the left nav. Okay, that was that demo. We'll have longer demos later. So what do I need? Well, I've read the documentation, and what am I going to need? Well, to to set up an LTI tool, you need things like your tool domain, your tool login initiation URL, your tool redirect URLs, and your tool JWKS URL. And so when you build your tool, you're gonna know what those are, and you're gonna be able to configure. You want to configure those into the Learn platform. So the platform is the overarching for Blackboard Learn systems, and then yet there are individual Learn instances. So you start out by setting up on the platform, and you use the developer portal for that, and then you're going to get back from the Learn platform. You're going to get the issuer URL, our public key set URL, our authorization token point, and so on. And then last, you're going to wonder where you test your tool. So this is going to show, now I'm going to show in the developer portal how you register your LTI 1.3 tool. And we'll just do an example. So, and I'm going to go, this is going to be a little bit longer demo than the last deep dive demo, because this one is actually registering the tool, and this can be helpful. And we're going to use Anthology. So you would sign up and you would get an account, and we're going to talk about signing up with an account that is an organizational email for your final production product. But you can, as an individual, you can sign up too and get a developer account that you would use for yourself during development. You can transfer your applications over to the organizational email account when you would like to. But to get started, you can just sign up with your own account and then log in. And let's say I want to create an LTI 1.3 application. What I do is I go here and I give my application a name. And here I type the domains that, and I can have multiple domains. They're separated with commas. And I give the domain that my tool is running at. So I'm just going to say, right, so demoapp.anthology.com, and it's going to go in some group, and then I'm going to turn on the LTI 1.3 so that I can, now your tool will have, it needs to have, based on the LTI 1.3 specification, it needs to have a login initiation URL, and that's the initial launch from Learn to the tool to authenticate, and then a redirect URI, which is the authentication response from Learn with the LTI 1.3 payload in it. And then a JWKS URL is where the public keys sit, where your tool has private keys and public keys, and you have a tool JWKS URL that holds the private keys, so or the public keys. So I can just make up for this demo example URL. So my login initiation URL would be my domain, and then I could just say login. And if I'm running Flask, I would do maybe a trailing slash there. And then the redirect. And then I can use copy and paste to be a little faster than typing by hand. And all right, so there I've entered, registered. I'm going to hit the register application button, and now our platform, it's called the Blackboard platform, it will know about these URLs, and it will know about the app, and it will give us back some information that we need. We're going to assume that I copied all this, but Here's where some things that the tool needs. It needs to know the issuer, which is blackboard.com. This is the blackboard.com public key set URL, so that's where you get your public key set. Here's the auth token endpoint for Blackboard, and here's the OIDC auth platform. I see we've got these now, these key set and auth token and OIDC auth. They're now, the new ones are all going to be developer.anthology.com. So that's, oops. And somehow, there it is right there. So there's our demo for the webinar. So what we've got back was we got a client ID. It's called an application ID. This is a key point. It's called an application ID in the developer portal. That is the LTI 1.3 client ID. And if I hit edit here, we can see all of that information. And that client ID is what I will deploy to a Learn system. So I'm going to leave this for now, and we'll come back here later and we'll do some things with managed placements. But that's the demo of the developer portal, how you set up an LTI 1.3 application that is good for all Learn instances. When you deploy the client ID to a Learn instance, you'll get a deployment ID. So real quick, where could I test? Well, if you go to the Amazon Marketplace, you can find the most recent production version of Learn as an Amazon Marketplace image. And so you'd want to test and develop on one of those if you have a Learn instance of your own that you can work with, like partners have some shared instances, and of course institutions have their staging or test instances of Learn that they could test on, but never test in production. So either the AMI or an instance that you have that's not a production instance, you'll want to work with. And there's a link down there that about how to set up and configure the developer AMI or the Amazon machine image so you have an instance to work with. I'll pause there for a minute if you want to take a photo of that link. We do have the slides available here as a PDF for download, and you might see those somewhere, or maybe I can share a link at the end to get those. It's a PDF file that you can get. So here's an overview of LTI. And so LTI is a way to connect, basically it's a way to connect two web applications, but it's all about learning technology. So it's a way LTI 1.3 has a single sign-on capabilities, a trust relationship between the platform and the tool. Actually, LTI 1.1 did too, but it was an older version of OAuth, and it used a key and a secret that you'd install on each Learn instance. Here you don't do that. You use OAuth 2, and each side has a public and a private key, so the messages can be signed. It provides services to get data into and from a platform. We're primarily talking about the basic launch today, so it's about getting data back to the LMS where like you can display a chapter from a book or a quiz or something like, or some video, so some content item. There's two versions. We'll talk a little later about LTI 1.1 and how you can convert that to LTI 1.3 in Learn. And so here's a brief history. I'm not going to even talk to this. Right now we're on LTI 1.3. Use that if you're developing anything new. LTI 1.1 has been deprecated. Key point here is that LTI 1.3 is basically it's an extension of the OAuth 2 specification and OpenID Connect, and then the IMS security. It's layers. So each one, it's layers of abstraction. Each one depends upon the one below it, and nothing at all is unique to Blackboard. It's all based on the spec. So today we're talking about the LTI 1.3 core. There will be other. We intend to have other webinars. I'll put it that way. Forward-looking statement applies. We intend to have other webinars on deep linking, names and roles, and assignments and grades. And there's actually some. I want to say this too. There are new specifications coming out. The LTI working group is working on. Like one of them is an asset processor, and the other one is actually turning deep linking into a service on the platform so that the tool can actually update the links in the platform without any manual intervention. So you want to be aware of what's happening in the LTI world, because if you're developing tools, as there will be changes that will actually give more advantages to both the LMS vendors and the tool developers. So here we go. We're going to dig into learn and best practices, and I'm keeping an eye on the time here. So we're going to go through architecture, registration, deployment, and troubleshooting. I'm breaking these down into 4 different types of where you can apply best practices so that things work well for you with Blackboard Learn. So for architecture, so this graphic is from the LTI 1.3 specification, and basically at registration time, that's what we just did on the developer portal. The tool is associated with the platform, and then at deployment time, the client ID that you got from your registration of the tool with the platform is deployed to an individual Learn instance, and as a result, you get a deployment ID. And the advantage of doing it this way, where you have one client ID that you give to every platform instance, is that, first of all, you as a tool developer can build out your tool and register it, and then all you need to do is hand our mutual clients a single client ID, and the clients don't have to get involved in, well, what's the login URL, what's a redirect URI, or any of that, any of the other many pieces of information that need to be exchanged. The only thing that needs to be exchanged is, here's your client ID, and then the Learn admin gives you back a deployment ID, and everyone's happy. Also, updates to the tool are simple. Like vendor can make a change in one place once on the developer portal. They can add, you could add a redirect URI, you could change the application name, or you could add managed placements and change their names. So, and then the Learn admins can quickly synchronize those changes to their Learn instance. And then when they do that, the changes are just pulled from the developer portal. So register once, deploy everywhere. Also, when you design, you want to, we've had some folks who, they try to use the redirect URI as the means to point to the resource on the tool. Like, you know, I have a picture of my, of each of my sons and a picture of my wife, and I say, okay, I'm going to just use a redirect URI to go to wife, son 1, son 2. The redirect URI is really the endpoint for the OAuth response. It's based on the OIDC specification. The LTI piece is in the LTI payload that comes along with that. So you want to use the LTI payload to specify the resource in the tool that's going to be given back to the LMS instance. So you want to use maybe the target link URI or custom parameters, or the resource link, the ID that's associated with the resource link. But the endpoint that is going back to is a redirect URI. You don't want to use that. because otherwise you have to pre-register a whole bunch of endpoints. I had one vendor ask about, well, I have 1,000 resources that I want to redirect to using the redirect URI, and it's like, no, you don't do that, because that's way too many. And our platform registration, there's not room in the text box for 1,000, and that's a lot to have people manage. So just use use one of those other ones. And there is a video here, and maybe if we have time we can come back and play it later, but I'm going to carry on right now. It's about a 5-minute video, and I don't know that I have 5 minutes of time. So in registration, we talked about using an organizational email. And that's because individuals come and go from the organization, and so you want to, and the email is what you're using to manage the tools that you've registered. So just use an organizational email account to create the production group that the tool is running on. And you can, as an individual, I could transfer my application that I've developed to a production group that is managed by the Anthology organizational email. So there is a way to transfer an app from one group to another, so that the whole organization can manage an app that I developed. And there's a community post on that. There's also a video, a YouTube video. I'll pause there for a minute if you want to take a shot of those those links, a screenshot of those links. So the other piece is that during registration, if you set up your managed placements before when you register the tool on Learn on the platform, on the developer portal, then when the tool is deployed to the Learn instance, it's already set up, so it's a consistent tool presentation on all Learn instances. So what is a managed placement, and what are my options? Today, for this discussion, we're going to talk about the first 5: deep linking, course content, a course tool, a system tool, and an admin tool. Those below the line, the Ultra extension, and so on, those we'll save for another day. They do require some more setup and configuration, and maybe even a special permission from Anthology, to maybe a special agreement that requires like a support ticket and maybe some extra additional contract to do like an Ultra extension. So deep linking, course content, course system, and system admin. So when you go to create a placement and Learn, and you have these options on the developer portal too, you see a page like what's on the screenshot on the right, where you can pick those different types of managed placements. And so your deep link and course placements, they show up in the content market of Ultra. And a course content item is it would be a big box like that with the name of the placement, and then it would be a little circle with a plus to actually create the placement. With the deep link, then you would just click on the box. So those are those 2 placements. So course content and deep linking, they show up in the content market. And then the system tool placement shows up on the left nav of the Ultra base navigation under tools. And you see there's one that says local LTI 1.3 system. And when that button was clicked, we got a little picture of a Bobcat. That's our sample code. that we have a node sample code that we have. It's not the Python sample code that I'm going to show you today. And then lastly is the admin placement, where if you create a managed tool that is admin of the type admin, it shows up under tools and utilities on the admin page. And then the same thing, when launched, it would, in this case, show the Bobcat. So predefining managed placements at registration time. I'm actually going to demo that in a minute. So for LTI 1.1 so for deployment, we're going to talk about LTI 1.1 to 1.3 conversion. We're going to talk about updating the deployment, and that's where I'll show you the managed placement piece. You want to redeploy. You never want to delete. That's a major point here is never delete an LTI 1.1 tool that your instructors are using, or never tell an institution to delete the LTI 1.1 tool. Never tell them to delete a LTI, a managed placement. Always make them unavailable, because when you delete them, all of the information is gone from the database and the links will stop working and there's no way to recover them. It's like burning a house down, and it's not good. So make it unavailable, don't delete it. And when you do the LTI 1.1 to 1.3 conversion, the links will automatically be converted to LTI 1.3 launches. That was a beautiful piece that they wrote into the Learn code, was that if your LTI 1.3 tool has the same domain, when we did the platform registration on the developer portal, when we registered the tool, we listed the domain. So if I had an LTI 1.1 tool that had, I'll just go back there. If I had an LTI 1.1 tool that had this domain, if I had an LTI 1.1 tool with that domain, and then I deployed in my Learn system, and I deployed the client ID for this app to my Learn system, the links would automatically be converted to LTI 1.3. The major point is redeploy and never delete, and let the Learn system convert the LTI 1.1 links to the LTI 1.3. And then the last bit about institution roles, there is a way to map custom institution roles, which some institutions use, to LTI 1.3 institution roles. By default, the Learn default institution roles will automatically be mapped to LTI 1.3 institution roles. But for custom roles, that doesn't happen. So we've had cases where the institution is using custom roles, and then the LTI 1.3 launch is having problems, and that's because the custom roles haven't been mapped to the LTI 1.3 roles, and that's available under the course organization roles configuration. And then last, I just want to say that a future version of Learn will not allow deleting tools or managed placements that are in use. That's something that we have a case open for. It's in our backlog, and it will happen someday. So someday you won't be able to actually go and delete a managed placement or a tool that is actively being used in courses. But for now, just don't do that. Here's just a screenshot of what you see when the domain that of the LTI 1.1 tool was the same as the LTI 1.3 client ID that I deployed. Here is a screenshot of the institution roles, where you scroll down near the bottom and there's a menu that says LTI spec role, and that's where you can set that for the custom role. So then the Learn admin has to go through and map each custom institution role to an LTI spec role. Okay, yeah, so here's where I will show the bit about managed placements and how nice that is. So on my application, and I'm going to use the live one. Actually, we'll use the one that I just set up. So if I go here and go manage placements and I register a new one, and I'll just make it a course content tool, and shoot, I'm gonna have to go back because I don't remember off the top of my head the domain that I used. So we'll just cancel that, and then we'll go back to our demo app, and we'll go to manage placements, and we'll register one. And this is the target link URI. So this will come across in the launch as the target link URI. We'll just do that. And so a couple things we can do here is we can set up to allow student access. We can tell it to launch in a new window. We can give the URL of our icon that we want displayed next to our managed placement. I'm not going to do any of that, but it's nice then when the Learn admin deploys the tool to their system, they'll get those icon URLs and whatnot. So, okay, so now we've got our managed placement set up. So now when I go back to the app, and I go to, and I take that client ID, and I go to my Learn system, I go to LTI tool providers, and I plug that in. I'll just approve it. Now this tool actually won't work because I don't have any code running behind it. But so there's our demo app. It's an LTI 1.3 tool, and then notice under Manage Placements, I've already got my managed placement there. So that can save the Learn admin a lot of work, and it also gives your tool a consistent look and feel across all Learn systems. Okay. All right, next we're going to talk about some troubleshooting tips and tricks. I'm going to show this real quick because I think it can be helpful, and it's a segue into demoing the application that we have code out there for. Is first of all, you have access. If you have, you can get access to the logs, Learn logs, and the two logs that you look at are in BB services logs. All the LTI, any issues with LTI will end up in the BB services log.txt file. And then also the access log will at least show you the endpoints on the Learn system that are being hit as that goes. And then last is the developer console is huge in troubleshooting LTI issues. You can actually see the JWT that is used to transfer the JSON payload about the launch back and forth. So real quick, if I go here and I go into my course, and let's hope this works. It's a demo, right? So let's see. I get my browser console up, and I will do the launch. So we'll do this launch first. This one uses the target link URI to direct the tool to the content that we want displayed. But here's the actual launch, and if you look at the payload, you see a thing called a JWT. It's encoded in a certain way that it actually includes the JSON payload, and the way to debug that to see what's in there, because it's not human readable, is there's a website called jwt.io, and if you go there and you paste that thing, then you can see the LTI 1.3 payload, and right here you're going to see one of the items in the payload will be the target link URI, and that's what we use to tell our tool code what resource to display. So if I can find that real quick, there it is right there. So see, it's telling it the target link URI is that endpoint on the tool. So that's not the redirect URI. The redirect URI is where we went from learn, but then the target link URI in the LTI payload is where we're going to end up. So we only have to register one redirect URI, and we could go to many different target link URIs. Okay, and that's kind of the point about troubleshooting using your developer browser console. It's super helpful to be able to do that. Okay, and I've got about 15 minutes. I think I just demonstrated that with the browser console. So now the last few minutes we can talk about the application. The code is out there at that website. There's a short URL there that you can use as well to get to it. You could probably just Google search that. And so we use Python 3.10.9. The libraries we used were, they're all defined in requirements.txt. The main dependencies are Flask and PyLTI 1p3. Flask is a web application server, and then a gentleman named Dimitri, he wrote the PyLTI 1p3 library that can be loaded into Python, that can be used on top of Flask, easily on top of Flask, to decode LTI 1.3 payloads. So all of that stuff with the JWT that you were just looking at, all that funny text, it deals with that and converts it into JSON for you, and then you can pull out you can pull out the custom claim, you can pull out the target link URI, whatever you need to. And then as part of Python, we used the date time and JSON and maybe a little bit of OS. So in the code, you're going to see the login route, and that's where that bit handles the first part of the launch and the login piece, and then the second part of the code is the /launch. That's the redirect URI, and then here this page shows handing that off to the target link URI. So I go through and I get my message launch data on here. I get my message launch data, and then I pull the target link URI out of the LTI 1.3 is set up into claims, so the claim can have multiple pieces of data in it. Here we're just interested in the information that comes after that, so I can pull the target link URI out of that claim, and then I just say, well, I parse it, and then I say if it contains the word anthology, then I'm going to basically redirect my tool to that target link URI. And then else or otherwise I'll just carry on assuming that the target link URI was the same as the redirect URI. Let's see, hopefully that'll. So if they are the same, then I don't want to use the redirect URI. I'll use my custom parameters to send my tool where I want it to go. So I'll send it to a page that is a custom parameter. And so I'm going to close out the developer. Find the little X, get rid of that. And then we're going to look at the tool that we've registered, the launch JWKS. So this is the demo code right here. That's that tool. And when we look at the managed placements, we'll see two different managed placements here. They're both course content tools. So they both show up as course content in the content market. And the anthology launch is the one that uses the target link URI to determine where to go. And the Better Books Google New Window, if we look at that managed placement, what we'll see is that we can have a custom parameter associated with that managed placement called external URL, and that sends our tool to this external. Our tool will then go to that external URL, and it will. But we also get to pass it the custom parameters. So that was the beginning of our presentation when we talked about context of the application that we're trying to move. This is what solved the problem that Chris Bray at University of Arkansas had with launch external JSP replacement. Was we could replace it with this, and then he could pass on the user ID or some other custom parameter that he needed, that the external vendor needed, about who was doing the launch. So if we go into our course, and we click on the Books Google New Window, what's going to happen is our site can't be reached. So I have a thing called Zscaler that may have, yeah, it's a, so my tool just got broke by our security system that I have to disable to make my browser behave with the tool. So I'm going to take a moment and see if we can get that working again. Otherwise, I'll just talk to it. Okay, that's working. All right. I made a sanity page where I could just go to the tool, the root of the tool, and it would. Okay. This must be old stuff. Try one more time here. one more thing here. Turn off one more bit of private access. Let's try this one. There we go. So that was the managed placement that used the target link URI to end up where /anthology, well, it should open the anthology page. And then here's we'll try this one again. There we go. And so you see here where it used that custom parameter we had defined in the managed placement. So it passed that on to the external website. So if the external website had a way of pulling off that parameter and doing something with it, it could. Okay, I went rather quickly and we finished in about 51 minutes. So we do have some time for Q&A. I haven't been following the chat at all, or I have time to show that little video about the LTI launch if you guys want to watch that. So let's see, looking for chat. Dylan, Davey, have you seen questions in the chat that we can talk about?
Yeah, I already answered a couple of them. We don't have any right now, so if you want to play the video, I think you're good.
All right, I'm going to do that then. It's actually a good summary of what we just saw, so that would be a good thing to do. So this is a very helpful video in understanding the LTI 1.3 core launch. There's a little bit at the end where he's not clear that it's the target link URI that's the browser is being directed to, but that is the case. And so with that, I will end with sharing this video.
Before you play the video, we do have a question that you may be able to answer.
Okay.
So the question comes from Kevin Crooks. He says, the external launch window remains visible after the launch. Is there a way to get this to disappear?
This window? There is a way. I think there's a piece in the code about an interstitial window that you can get rid of. There also is a piece about security where if you're going to an external website, we don't want that to be on the Learn page. So that's one reason why it's popping over in another window. So you could try it with that interstitial setting in the code, in the sample code. But yeah, it's pretty important that Learn not be showing the same thing in the Learn window that is on an external website. This page is not a tool. It's a page directed to by the tool. So we need to get away from the LTI 1.3 tool content, which can be displayed in the peak panel, and just show it over on the side. So, and Kevin, I'll be happy to follow up with you more on that. If you want to send email to developers@blackboard.com or at anthology.com, I'm sorry, developers@anthology.com, I will follow up with you on that. We'll see if we can make it behave how you would like to make it behave. Do we have any other questions? Okay, well, here's the recording. It's about 5 minutes.
Let's have a look now at the core mechanics of LTI, which is the LTI launch, and OpenID Connect, and how it relates to OpenID Connect. So the LTI launch flow is actually based on a third-party initiated flow from OpenID Connect, and that's a big change compared to the previous version of LTI, because now the launch is done in two phases. There is a pre-flight launch saying that to the tool, hey, a user wants to launch in your tool, and then there is subsequently the actual launch. So why do we have a pre-flight? Well, the pre-flight allows the tool to mark which browser will make the request and thus prevents cross-site request forgery attacks. So let's have a look a bit more closely on how that unfolds. So here we have Jane, and Jane, she's in an economics course and she wants to launch a Monopoly activity. So she clicks on the link and that initiates the actual LTI launch flow. So it starts with a pre-flight. So when Jane clicks on that link in the browser informs the learning platform backend that Jane wants to launch a Monopoly activity. The learning platform looks up which tool owns that activity and then crafts the initial request to be sent to the tool and where to send it. So the request that will be made to the tool contains the issuer, identifying the platform, and then there is also the target URL, which is a final URL that the tool is expected to go to at the end of the flow. And then there is a login int. The login int is a very important thing. It's a note from the platform to itself to remember which request flow this is related to. So for example, it could contain information like this is a launch from Jane to launch Monopoly in the course Economics 101. So login int is not meant to be consumed by the tool. It just needs to be passed back to the learning platform to continue the launch flow. So the browser receives the learning platform response and can now redirect itself to the tool, including the initiate login request. The tool then receives this request and looks up the issuer in its own database and then crafts the actual authentication request. The authentication request will contain the client ID identifying the learning tool, but also the redirect URI, which is where the learning platform needs to send the authentication response, and the authentication response being the actual ID token or LTI message. It also contains the login int as provided by the learning platform. Finally, and key to the cross-site request forgery protection, the authentication request will contain the nonce. The nonce uniquely identifies this authentication request from the tool's perspective. And that nonce contains the data that binds it to the actual browser where the authentication request is being made. So in practice, this is often achieved using a browser cookie. So when returning to the browser the request to be sent to the learning platform, the tool also sets a cookie. That cookie marks the browser as the originator of that request, and that marker is also in some way embedded within the nonce value itself. So on receiving the authentication request, the learning platform will look up the client using the client ID and check that the redirect URI requested by the tool is actually one of the pre-registered redirect URIs. If so, using the login int to know which user and launch this is all about, it will craft the actual LTI message, that is the ID token, and that ID token will contain Jane's identity, but it will also contain the LTI claims around roles, course, and activity. And also, this ID token will also include the nonce value as received from the tool. Then that goes back to Jane's browser, which redirects itself one last time to the tool with the ID token. Now the tool gets the ID token, but also the browser marker here passed as a cookie. So then the tool will verify that everything is correct. So the first thing it's going to do is the ID token properly signed by the issuer? Is it not expired? Am I the intended audience of that ID token? And now it will look at the nonce inside that ID token, and in particular the browser's marker. Does it match the one that it received from the browser, from the cookie? If not, this means this request was played from another browser, that's the one that made the request, and should be rejected. If all of that is good, then we are not done yet. The tool must still validate that that user in that course and role can access the resource. If the user is authorized to access the activity, then the browser either displays directly the activity or is usually sent a final redirect to go to the final destination. And there we go, the Monopoly opens up and Jane can start buying hotels on Rue de la Paix or Boardwalk.
So that concludes this. The key point at the end is that that last redirect was to the target link URI.
And once again, we'd probably like to specifically call out and thank Claude for all his contribution to the LTI community from Cengage. He used to work at Blackboard, so he was an old ex-employee friend of mine, but he now works at Cengage and continues to produce great content like this as well.
Yeah, he's a great guy. Thanks, Dylan. So that ends our webinar for today. Again, feel free to reach out to developers at anthology.com with any questions. And Kevin, I will follow up with you. And I want to wish you all to have a great rest of your day. Thank you.